You're listening to Dodge Movie Podcast. Your hosts are Christy and Mike Dodge, the founders of Dodge Media Productions. We produce films and podcasts, so this is a podcast about films. Join them as they share their passion for filmmaking.
Welcome back, everybody, to Dodge Movie Podcast. We are nearing the end of our Kevin Smith month, and today we are talking about a film that is not technically a Kevin Smith film. It is written and directed by Susannah Grant, who also wrote Aaron Brockovich in 28 Days. He stars in this alongside Jennifer Garner, Timothy Olyphant, Sam Jaeger, and Julia Lewis. A hilarious Julia Lewis. This film came out in 2006, and it is set in Boulder, Colorado, but it was filmed partially in Boulder and partially in Vancouver, BC. There is a scene of Stanley Park, if any of you have been up to Vancouver, BC's Stanley Park. The synopsis is: a woman struggles to accept the death of her fiancé and the secrets he kept from her as she rebuilds her life. And the tagline is, life is messy, love is messier. Mike, what's the pickup line for this film?
You want to know what I keep thinking about? That's in VO. That comes from Gray, played by Jennifer Garner. And it's at the funeral for the ex-fiancé.
Well, yeah, I guess they never became a husband.
Well, I suppose dead fiancé. When I said ex, I meant like ex-living. But This is an interesting thing. So the inciting incident takes place off-screen, but also chronologically before the first shot. Normally we would have an inciting incident, but I would argue the inciting incident is in fact the death of this fiancé. Mm-hmm. The other thing that's kind of interesting is we find out that the reception from the funeral is on the same day and at the same location that the wedding was supposed to be.
It's a little morbid.
It is. So it does set up the bit where it's like the florist or something shows up and somebody intercepts them and tells them, no. But the coincidence of that, I just don't know. It kind of bumped me a little bit. And there was a line of dialogue in there where she says, why do they keep talking about him in the past tense? And that immediately bumped me because that's one of the things that it takes people a while to do, is to use the past tense when someone dies. You keep using the present tense because that's who they were to you. So to me, it kind of hung a lampshade on something that didn't quite make sense for me.
Mm-hmm. I thought in a way it was a pretty good show don't tell, in that the flowers were delivered. We see the invitation to show that it was supposed to be a wedding and not a funeral. There's wedding presents around the house even days after because she's staying with like his buddies. And like there's even a scene, which this bumped me. There's a scene where they open up the refrigerator and there's like this giant, like at least 2.5 foot tall wedding cake in the refrigerator. And I just thought, where are the shelves? No refrigerator has no shelves in a home that you could put a cake of that size in.
And I was just thinking about how awesome it would be to have a cake of that size in my refrigerator.
There's a great scene, although it's tragic at the same time, where Jennifer has to just get away from all of the guests who are creeping her out, and just she's too overwhelmed to really deal with this. And so she goes and hides in an upstairs bathroom tub. And it's this great overhead scene where she's in this black dress against the,
white of
the stark white tub.
And the curtain is also completely white.
Yeah, which is great because it probably served as a perfect diffuser, right?
Oh, yeah. Good thinking.
And she's laying there just besought. And Timothy Olyphant comes into the bathroom with the waitress that we saw him flirting with earlier. And it's funny because in my notes, we watched this film about 2 weeks ago, and my notes say showing elephant flirting with the waitress. And I was like, why did I write elephant? And I think I wrote Oliphant and autocorrect.
Right. I think
it to elephant.
Isn't Oliphant the Afrikaans word for elephant? So it probably thought, okay, Udo was typing, I'll just fix it up.
So there's this horrible scene where she gets to listen to her fiance's buddy banging the waitress. There's a mere thin curtain between them.
I do want to mention, though, that something that bumped me about that scene was not that Oliphant would be able to get a little hookup. And it is an interesting meet cute that he's banging some rando and she's hiding on the other side. It's that the server that he's hooking up with keeps shouting, "Sock it to me." So
timely reference.
Is that like the airline dub? Because I don't think someone said "sock it to me" since 1950. And I don't think even then they said it in the throes of passion. It was such an odd piece of dialogue.
Maybe that's why, Susannah put it in there, because it was just like,
Right.
What the? Like, if this scenario wasn't bizarre enough,
Right.
that you're...
Okay, that makes some sense that maybe what got cut out in the edit was there's a point where Gray says to the Oliphant character, whose name I now forget, but she says to him, like, what was this Sakatumi business? This makes no sense, right? That was the thing I think he would mention.
Fritz,
Fritz,
it
right?
says.
Fritz.
You have good eyes. He's like a good 6 feet from this computer screen, man. I could have never seen that.
So I will mention that Timothy Oliphant is an attractive human being.
Yes.
That helps when you're an actor. Not required, but certainly helps. But of his work, I think in this film, he is looking like at his very best.
Yeah.
Throughout this entire film. It is easy to believe that he would be very popular in the social scene,
yes.
right? Because he's so gorgeous. However, it makes it harder to believe that he's a director, right?
I was just going to say, but he's a Hollywood director, so...
Well, we're in a month of Kevin Smith films. I think we can say that you don't have to be tall and fantastically good looking to be a director.
Ouch.
I did not say Kevin wasn't. He's just not that tall. So to me, that was a tiny bit of a stretch, because I kept seeing him thinking, if he went to Hollywood, he'd be an actor. He wouldn't be a director.
Yeah.
Right. Plus, then I could make all kinds of self-deprecating comments like directors, he would be neurotic and have low self-esteem and all those things. But I'm not going to do that.
What other cinematography did you like?
So I did like how the camera movement when Jennifer Garner was hiding in the tub. I thought that was a clever way to do that. There was a shot where they pan along the floor to Oliphant's feet, Fritz, when he's getting busy, and then they pan up. So I thought that was also clever. They had an interesting cut of fishing when Dennis and Sam are practicing in the laneway behind the house.
Yeah.
That was nice. There's a gorgeous long shot of the garden where Grady's mom meets Gray to get the ring back.
No, that's not the garden. Wait. At the end?
No, that's a garden. There's like a pond and they're sitting on a bench.
Yeah, that's Stanley Park.
Okay, well, Stanley Park is beautiful.
Yes, it is. I thought we went when the boys were little.
I'm sure we did.
Okay.
But I
Yeah,
did
I love
recognize
Stanley Park.
that specific location in
Yes.
Stanley Park.
Okay.
So there is a dinner. They have an outdoor dinner at a long table, and it's lit by candles. And I will say it was far better lit than just those candles would give you. I mean, I'll give the filmmakers this, because what else are you going to do? But there's a scene where Gray's character gives her "I'm not perfect" rant.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a slow pan across the other characters as she's giving this rant and telling all these things that are quote unquote not perfect.
Yeah.
I thought it was great, maybe more in the editing, where in there, in the middle of it, not at the tail end, in the middle of it, she says, I've been with a girl before in college or something. And as they cut to a longer shot, you just hear the voiceover from Sam, played by Kevin Smith, asking her details about that intimate encounter. And I thought it was a great little humorous tag on the end of what was a kind of dramatic scene.
Yes. And what was really funny, I don't remember him saying anything, because in my notes, I say he silent bobs it up because his eyes get big. I think it was after that, but for a little bit, he's just quiet and he's totally making all the silent bob faces of his reaction to a woman saying she made it with a girl.
If I remember correctly, the line, and again, this is almost like VO because it's such a long shot. He says, "So were you the butch or the bottom?"
Yeah, I feel like that was after for some reason.
Yeah, I could be wrong. Susannah
I do
Grant
remember
can go
that
ahead
line. So yeah, it's interesting that we both kind of out of the same scene got a couple, that's the audience experience, right? This is filmmaking or storytelling that different viewers can get different things.
Again, I want to invite Susannah Grant to come on the show and we can talk about this in more detail.
Well, because I have that in my writing section, and what I loved was that Sam's character was a writer of Celestial Seasonings, which I looked up and is headquartered in Boulder, Colorado. So I like that attention to detail. I'm wondering if she's from Boulder or if she just happened to spend some time there, but I feel like she was very knowledgeable of the area, and it is almost like another character of this film. So I like that he was a writer of those quotes that are often found, and throughout the film sprinkled in are the different quotes and what tea variety they are from. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed that kind of gag as a running theme throughout the film. I also like how stories unfold, as we've talked about with our like Duplass movies. And this one very much had that at first we think that Grady, Jennifer's fiance that she didn't get to marry, he seemed like the perfect guy because, you know, his friends loved him. He was a good son. She adored him. He was her everything. And then we start to see that he kind of had some flaws and that he was cheating, and he had a son with Juliette Lewis's character, Maureen. So I like how as the film develops, we get to know more about Grady and get to find out he wasn't all that everyone thought he was.
I would call that progressive disclosure.
Yes.
I don't know. Maybe I invented that term.
I like it.
To be clear, though, there is at one point questionable parentage of the child in question. But what we find out is that he had an active relationship with the character Maureen, played by Juliette Lewis, who lived in LA. So when he went to visit Fritz, the director, in Hollywood, he would take a little trip on the wild side with Juliette Lewis. And then Gray is slowly discovering this, which I thought was good storytelling, that it wasn't just this big thing. There's a line of dialogue in there where Oliphant says something and she then, and asks for further clarification. And so he's even slowly trying to just dribble out little bits of what his buddy was up to, trying to protect his buddy as long as he can. Which I think is probably reasonable because, as we understand it, Fritz and Gray didn't know each other really up until this time. So I could see that he would try to protect his buddy over the ex-fiance.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else with the writing that you want to talk about?
Oh, just a few things. I thought it was great Kevin Smith a la Silent Bob when Sam and Dennis are carrying the couch and it falls and his instinct is to point at Dennis.
No, is it the couch or Jennifer?
Well, we need to get back to that in later in the film. But so there is a point where Gray heckles Maureen for not swearing, and then she says she's effing PO'd, which I thought was kind of funny to work that back in there. Again, airline safe edit for that film. Mm-hmm. It was delightfully awkward when Grady's mother asks for the ring back. Mm-hmm. And there's this dialogue between them, and the mother first says, "How the hell did this happen?" And then she says, "No satisfied man is screwing some cocktail waitress." Mm-hmm. It was delicious, but I think it worked because the character was still very upset. She was grieving. Mm-hmm. Right? I can kind of see that.
Well, then she's pissed because she tries to give Gray another ring so she can have the family ring back.
Right.
And Gray's like, "No, Grady gave this to me. I'm not giving it back." So she's pissed as well as grieving.
Right. Although as we find out, Grady isn't exactly who she thought he was.
Mm-hmm.
There's a fun line in there, which I think is probably indicates that Susannah Grant spent some time in Boulder, if it wasn't there. This is like a Patagonia Disneyland. I thought that was a clever line. And there's a funny bit at the dinner where Gray's character makes a statement that catch-worthy fishermen are heartless weenies because they traumatize the fish over and over again, which I would argue, I think actually lowers the difficulty of fishing if you keep throwing the dumb ones back. Like you need to sterilize them before you throw them back at a bare minimum if you're not going to eat them. And Kevin Smith's character, Sam, has a great line about the food prepared by Maureen of, "I reached my annual quota of turf." And that sounds so much like Kevin. I do wonder if he was given a little liberties in the dialogue there.
Yeah, yeah. Going back to cinematography, the scene at the end at that lake, I mean, there's some beautiful shots there, and there's somewhere it looks overcast. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I thought I read somewhere that there actually was a forest fire going on, and so that's what smoke doubles. Oops. Yeah, but that whole portion at the lake is just so beautiful of all the different, they all kind of go off on their own little excursions and adventures. And, you know, like Gray goes and reads a book and Sam hangs out with the kid, I think.
Yeah.
Dennis is fishing. So they all kind of, I don't know. It's kind of a quiet moment. There's not as much dialogue during a lot of those scenes. There's a sweet scene where the little boy walks up and Jennifer ties his shoe and then looks at the hat that was Grady's hat. So I love that scene at the end.
Also, there's an important plot point there where Dennis, for the first and only time, expresses his feelings for Gray, which we as the viewer have been seeing hints throughout the entire film.
But the other thing is we have seen Gray and Fritz hook up, and
Right.
Dennis doesn't know that.
At that time, he does not
Yeah.
know that. Right. There's actually a montage of Gray and Fritz bumping uglies. So that is, I think, maybe not as common a montage as dancing or shopping or some of the other things. Of course, the best montage is eating food, but everyone knows that.
And Kevin's character, Sam, is really the heart of the group, and he kind of is keeping everyone together. I think kind of he's the lighthearted, not only his quotes from the tea boxes, but he is obsessed with all of the waffle irons that Jennifer gets. And I think there's even a scene where he's got like 3 or 4 of them going at once. But then there's a moment where we get some real feels because he's really missing his buddy Grady. And maybe Grady used to be the glue. And so I think we're supposed to believe, basically, he kind of attempted to take his life. So that kind of brings everybody back together. So the movie's got some feels.
Mm-hmm.
So for costumes, we already mentioned her black dress and against the white tub. And then any Kevin Smith fan will notice that he got to choose a lot of his own clothing for this film because all of his jerseys have the number 37 on it. And Mike, you probably could tell this better than even me. What is the significance of the 37 on all of Kevin Smith's clothing and a director kind of trademark?
I heard it was a callback to a line from his first film, Clerks, where Dante is celebrating being the 37th person to receive oral favors from one of their friends.
Classic Kevin Smith.
Classic Kevin Smith callback.
Yep.
I love Sam's tie-dyed shirt. I'm not a tea drinker, but I almost might be just to get that cool Celestial Seasonings tie-dyed shirt. Fritz in his vintage t-shirts and old blue jeans. I didn't know they had hipsters in 2006.
I think he even makes like a hipster, or maybe that's the Patagonia
right, Disneyland,
comment. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
I wasn't sure where they were going with what they did for Jennifer Garner as Gray. At one point, she has twin braids, and she looks more like a milkmaid than anything. And I don't know if they were going to go hippie because there was this embroidered flare-cuffed peasant blouse she was wearing. I really felt like that character had an eclectic wardrobe. Couldn't really get a read on it.
I might be able to enlighten some of this.
Mm-hmm.
She was pregnant during this, so a lot of her clothing I noticed were loose,
Mm-hmm.
and that could have been to hide a tummy.
Yes, it may have been. I also made a note that she appeared to be a bit bustier in this film than I remembered,
Well,
and
there
that
you
would
go.
explain it,
Mhm.
right? Probably pregnant.
So the sets, pretty much like we talked about, is Boulder, I think.
Right.
Yeah. I was trying to figure out, maybe it was really more Vancouver because I can't see them flying everybody up to BC just for that Stanley Park shot. So I bet the majority of the film was done in Vancouver, BC. And then there were, the Celestial Seasonings and the downtown Boulder was used for those shots.
Could be, sure. Yeah. I
Because,
can see that.
it doesn't make sense just for that one. I noted for sound, at the very end, there's a VO of Gray. And she's basically giving, not a eulogy, but I guess they have a commemorative garden that they made for Grady. And she's giving a speech at the end. And instead of hearing what she's saying to the audience, we're hearing what she's saying almost like to Grady as like a final goodbye kind of thing.
Right.
There was lots of smoochies,
Smoochy.
as you mentioned, with her and Fritz. This really isn't a romantic comedy either. It's more of a drama because there wasn't really the classic smoochie at the end, was there?
No, there was not.
So there were just the salacious ones throughout.
Right. At the very end of the film, she goes to see Fritz in L.A.
Right.
And they meet on the beach,
Oh.
but I don't remember a specific smoochie at that point. They may have, and I just didn't make notes.
I think they do, actually. So maybe this does. Well, let's see. Would she be the lead? She would be the lead. So is she transformed?
You definitely could make that argument, yeah, that she is transformed by her relationship with Oliphant, but I don't know that I think that was it. I think she's more transformed by the experience of losing her fiancé and what she learns about him, because there's a point where one of the characters, I think it's Oliphant, says that the reason he acted out with Maureen when he was in LA is because he didn't have to be perfect all the time, implying that she was holding on too tight and that Grady felt like when he was around Gray, he had to be perfect. That's why she had the I'm not perfect rant,
Right.
was to establish that she's not that uptight person. So I would argue that it's actually the loss of her fiance that is the thing that transformed her more than meeting Fritz.
Yeah, I would agree. So this is more a drama. Well,
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I would agree. Okay, head trauma.
Well, we've got a couple. There's a part where she gets drunk. She goes to a bar and she's trying to, I suppose, get laid. And she gets super duper drunk and they're carrying her in to take her to bed and they drop her. And I cannot figure out how they didn't drop Jennifer Garner.
Right.
And then we did also mention, we just alluded to, at 36:30, Sam has overdosed on painkillers and alcohol, and they are carrying Kevin Smith, the actor, and they drop him. And we have more than once paused this to see.
Yes.
And it, for the life of us, appears that his head hits the corner of the counter.
Yes. I
on the way down.
Demand the behind the scenes of this and how they did it, because I agree. This viewing, we did it. And then another time we watched this movie, we backed it up at least 2 or 3 times, trying to find the cut.
Frame by frame.
How they shot this and did not smack Kevin Smith on the corner. And it's a hard smack on the corner.
It looks terrifying.
Of like a counter or like a rolling dishwasher. I mean, it's brutal.
This will not be the first thing I'm going to ask Kevin when he's on the show, but hopefully we'll get to that at some point because I want to know how they did it.
Definitely.
And the third part of head trauma is actually a fair amount of violence when Gray slaps Fritz pretty hard, but that is more classically shot. That could have just been, perspective and cuts and things like that.
Right. Yeah.
So quite a bit of head trauma, though. Tip of the cap to Susannah for head traumas.
Yeah. In my notes, she slaps Timothy Elephant. I love it. I'm going to call him Timothy Elephant from now on. Shall we go to the numbers?
Let's.
Okay. This movie cost $25 million and it did not quite make it. It made $15 million domestically and $16 million worldwide. I don't have a grand conspiracy as to why.
Yeah, I guess they can't all be winners, but I'm stunned by that. This is a very good film.
It's a good movie, yeah. It's a 6 on IMDb. It does have a 22% Rotten score on Rotten Tomatoes.
What do people not like about this film?
I don't know. Maybe we didn't like Jennifer Garner because she's kind of like brooding and grieving at the beginning. Like, I should have looked up when, I think it was long before this, 13 to 30.
13 going on 30.
I think people like seeing a happy Jennifer Garner, not the brooding, angry, grieving, bitter Jennifer Garner.
Wasn't there that show Camping on HBO with David Tennant? I think she played
but
the
she
angry
wasn't,
one there.
Yeah. Well, she wasn't so much angry. Well,
I was also thinking
part.
of Yes Day, right? She's getting cast a lot apparently as the angry person.
Yeah, I wouldn't think of her as angry, just
super intense. Maybe needs to talk to her agent, do something fun, musical.
Yeah, so we have 2 hours of angry Jennifer. It's rated PG-13. It is listed as a comedy, drama, romance, but as we discussed, I think it's a little heavier on the drama. There are moments of comedy in this, definitely, even with like the scene at the beginning with Timothy and the waitress. So there are some funny scenes in it, and Kevin definitely brings some. He kind of is the the chubby funny guy that's always in films. So did I say it's rated PG-13? And it's a Columbia Pictures film.
Someone should make a film about a chubby guy who becomes a ninja. That'd be hilarious.
I think they did that. So join us next week as we will round out our Kevin Smith month. We're talking about a film just came out a couple of years ago, 2019's Jay and Silent Bob reboot. So this is not Jay and Silent Bob. This is not Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back. This is the third in the series of the reboot, and it's a different Kevin Smith. It's definitely told from an older, paternal Kevin Smith. So join us for that film, and if you haven't seen it, check it out before we talk about it next week. And don't forget,
Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.
Thanks for listening to Dodge Movie Podcast with Christy and Mike Dodge of Dodge Media Productions. To find out more about this podcast and what we do, go to dodgemediaproductions.com. Subscribe, share, leave a comment, and tell us what we should watch next. Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.